Hello and welcome to episode 4 of the Josh Leesman Experience. I hope you've been listening. I hope you've enjoyed the first 3 episodes of these LCS preview shows I've been doing. This will be the 7th and 8th team we cover. On this episode, I'm going to be talking about CLG and Immortals. And much like I did with C9, we have a massive CLG fan who works around the office, our writer, Elias. So we go into a little bit of history of the CLG fandom, what it takes to be a CLG fan, kind of how much pain is actually felt from the fact that they used to have Doublelift and Aframu and Xmithy, but also where there's still hope and whether or not they can make a run in 2020. And then I have MarkZ on to talk about Immortals. Kind of an episode of Xmithy's former teams, if you really think about it, and current team for Xmithy, but Immortals making a reemergence into the LCS, and we kind of get into some of their past successes in the older brand back in 2016 and 2017 before they return here in 2020. So episode 4, see you soon. Welcome back to JLXP. I am Jatt, joined by Elias to talk about CLG. And the reason we have Elias here is he is our LCS writer, but also a major old school CLG fan.
That's right, unfortunately.
When did you become a fan of the CLG team?
So I remember talking to people about this. I'm an anomaly when it comes to esports in general because I started watching the esport before I started playing the game.
How did you get into the esport then?
Because so it's this very specific Reddit thread of all things. Around season 2, what would have been season 2 for Worlds, which was like a bunch of problems. But the thing that caught out to me was there was a match between Azubu Frost and TSM, and there was this like cheating scandal.
Woong looked at the screen.
Yeah, they looked at the screen during a pause.
Yeah.
And I saw all this like fervor around it, and I was like, oh, sick. I need to know what this is about.
Oh, because it was just on like Reddit all. And it just shot to the top.
And I was like, what is this #1 thread? And I think I was new to Reddit, and I was like excited by it, and I wanted to know all the communities. And then I see this thing for this game that like I vaguely recall my roommate played in my freshman year of college, and he paid skins for this terrible character that looked like a like toilet paper, which was a muumuu. And like that's all I knew about the game up until that point. And I got really excited about the esport of it, and I watched towards the end of season 2, didn't understand a lick of it, and that's kind of my in. And then the way that became like a CLG thing was, CLG was a team that was so easy to understand when you don't know anything about the game.
Because they were just Doublelift?
They were just Doublelift. They were just like, that guy does the damage. The beefy people in front of him make sure he don't die. Cool, I can now start understanding the game and how it works. And these iconic plays of him on Graves or Vayne like stick out to me as the first league moments. And like once I started to get to know the personalities, then I was just like, oh, this is like sports. I'm into this. Like, I want this.
And then when do you start playing?
I don't start playing until like... So season 3 was when LCS started, right?
Yeah, LCS started spring with like an expansion tournament, and then CLG was in it. Then we had this awful format where even if you finished the season in 3rd, if you lost in quarterfinals of playoffs, you were in the promotion tournament. So CLG was immediately up for relegation right at the start of their LCS lives.
Like a Zorcats or something. So it was around that time I actually like downloaded the game because I was like, okay, watching this is pretty fun. I'm pretty into this. And I basically treated like the first days of League of Legends as like, what characters do they play? Let me try. Vayne's too hard. Malphite isn't that hard. Maokai is also not that hard. And like that's how I learned League of Legends. Yeah.
So you were around CLG for Hotshot and GG's.
Yeah.
And then eventually for the Darshan Zion Spartan era.
Yes. Yeah.
And then there was kind of the moment of glory where Kobe's call was immortalized. They actually have I Never Doubted Them kind of as a graffiti wall in the parking lot of their training facility.
That's so rad.
Yeah. I, as well as a few of the other casters, visited the CLG facility earlier this week, and I can tell you some of the stuff we talked about there. But
cool.
Yeah, it's a big part of CLG lineage. But at the start you said, I'm a CLG fan. Unfortunately.
Yes.
They have 2 titles.
They do have 2 titles.
That's more than a lot of other teams.
They do have 2 titles. The issue is it hurt to get there. And the idea, I think, because I was indoctrinated by the fans who had been there for a bit.
Yeah, and the fans that had been there for a bit knew when CLG was #1.
Yeah.
Before they went to Korea for the first time and competed in, it wasn't called the LCK, it was like Champion Spring or Champion Summer.
And I remember even like learning the team and looking up videos, and it was some series of awesome plays from Doublelift, and it was that classic push in that OGN does after a play where they just push in on a player and Doublelift's just like kind of smiling, and I'm like, I love this guy already.
Yeah, the full screen cut.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice.
So yeah, no, I joined after that, but I remember reading a lot about like, no, this has been pain. This has been, you know, a struggle, and especially because our rivals TSM have been winning. And like they were able to pass on like, hey, this makes us angry. It definitely should make you angry as well.
Yeah. So they won in 2016 summer. They don't retain Doublelift.
No.
Oh, did you know, I've been saying this to other people, that they only had Pobelter for one split?
That is a wild, like it.
You kind of knew,
yeah,
and it makes sense, but you're like, wow, he feels like such a bigger part of CLG history.
Right. He was so iconic to that.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's so weird. It's so strange because I remember just even the onset after, because like, I'm sure you remember, that World's Run was marred by like, will Smithy get his visa?
Yeah.
And like who he might have to jungle. And Hui was this player that like, I always thought was like, oh, you seem nice. Like this could be cool. And they talked him up a bit about like what he could be. And I thought that was like, oh, this could be kind of cool. And then when it was like a flat out replacement, and then Doublelift leaves, which was, I would say, like the first bit of drama that like
the leave kick. Like you never really know what like he makes it seem like he was kicked, and there was some Afro comments, and there was that whole weirdness around it.
Yeah, my God, I remember, not to get too deep into the drama, but I think that also is a part of what makes CLG fans. Yeah. But like when they won again in Vegas, which was incredible. Yeah. It's funny.
And then made finals at MSI right after.
Yeah, which was incredible because like that was the moment where I think a lot of the CLG subreddit and other forums decided like, okay, are you a Doublelift fan or are you CLG fan? Because you have to decide now before this split starts. And like that was the unspoken rule and very spoken rule at the same time. And I was like, no, I'll be a CLG fan. There's a part of me that like really liked Aframu because he was the player who stepped down from the role and he's like, no, I need to do this. This is how I win a championship. And there was something like really magical about that. The pitch for Hui was like, no, he's going to be a very supportive mid laner. I was like, that's kind of cool. I can get behind that. It's different. And like, that's a lot of what CLG, like fans and myself clings onto is when they pitch something is like, this is our different take. Like I get really hyped about that. I'm like, cool, I can buy into that. Then Vegas happens. The thing that I was originally referencing was like, Aframu has that like interview. He's like, this is for all the people that like, I don't
remember the exact quote, but it was something along the lines of, you know, people that are good at taking feedback, it's really good to have them on the team. And he just like said it in a personal way.
And like he also was just like, and I'd like to say I'm sorry for all the teammates I didn't stick up for when they were being bullied or something to that effect was the sentiment. And I was like, holy shit. And then I was like, I love this team. This is sick.
And then they, you know, were beating Korea in group stage and dabbing on stage. And that was peak CLG.
Yeah. And if you ask CLG fans, that should have lasted like 3 or 4 more years.
I think, at least as an outside observer, peak CLG happened when they 3-0'd TSM in Madison Square Garden.
That was huge. I was there. Yeah. It was my first live league event.
Because you weren't even a rider.
No. I was living in Brooklyn, working in Brooklyn. And I remember telling my friends from Florida, you have to come up because this is going to be big. It's going to happen. And I was like so sure, but like in this way, fans are just sure. I remember the line of people that I was standing with who were told eventually because Madison Square Garden were like, no, you have to leave, and we couldn't do the signings. And it was like wrapped around the whole arena. It was sick, and it was heartbreaking to learn we couldn't meet them after they finally won. But also all of us fans were just like laughing and hugging, and we were so happy together.
It was kind of a magical moment in my LCS memory because I didn't expect it to happen, and then it happened so swiftly. But I have a question for you. Yeah, because I have some thoughts about what makes the CLG fan base so CLG. Is it that they are sometimes self-defeating, or have they been conditioned that way because of the arcs of CLG? And I'll explain what I'm talking about here. It feels like, at least for the last 2 years, every time CLG looks like something's turning the corner, the instant that people get buy-in, it flips. And this goes back even further. So it's like going back to the first title. You got buy-in, then it flips. They don't have a jungler for Worlds. They eventually get him. You get buy-in again. Then they lose to Pain and don't make it out of groups and go 2-4. And then damn, that sucks. And then the high moment, to be fair, was MSI 2016 spring, where all the international AD carries say how great Stixxay is. They have the range support thing. Everything works. But then I remember Worlds that year, and peak CLG is when they beat Rocks.
Yeah.
They just smashed them in the group stage. And then CLG went 0-2 against Albus Nox Luna.
Mm-hmm.
And they still went 3-3. Like, the fact that looking back, CLG went 3-3 in that group without winning a single game against Albus Nox Luna is ludicrous.
Yep.
And then basically since that point, they haven't been able to get back to Worlds. And the last 2 years in LCS have actually been their worst years on record ever since Permanent Partnership. 3 splits of 7-11 in a row, 7th, 7th, 7th. As close as possible as you can get to playoffs without actually making playoffs. And then very recently getting 3rd place, but then still not making it through the regional qualifier, not even making it to the regional qualifier final, and basically ending the year in 5th. Is there something there just with the results that condition the CLG fan to feel the way they feel?
Absolutely. Like, it is absolutely the everything's a tightrope when you're a CLG fan.
Mm-hmm.
Everything is like is do or die, could work, couldn't work. Like you said, for Madison Square Garden, people were surprised it happened, and I don't think anyone. I can't remember, but I like to, as a CLG fan, remember nobody thought it'd be a 3-0. And I remember just relishing that, and how it was like, I still say to this day it's the best 3-0 of my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and because everything is so unexpected and nothing is sure, there is a level of excitement that I think people buy into.
Yeah.
The like masochism of it.
Yeah, they're playing a high school team, but you never know.
You never know. You just never know with CLG. There are no sure things, which makes them really exciting to watch. Like, mentioning the Rocks Tigers win was so huge to me. Like, seeing that, I was like, oh my God, we can do anything.
Yeah.
We can do anything. Even lose to Albus Nox Luna twice. Like, you can do anything, I guess. And there's a level of excitement in that. And I think CLG had like these moments where it's just like, well, what is CLG without Doublelift? What is CLG without Aftermoo at one point in time?
And that's kind of where they are now.
Yeah.
As we move towards 2020. You and I had touched on this conversation, and then we said, hey, let's just have it on the podcast.
Sure, yeah.
Where CLG has an identity. They have that old school fan base like yourself. They still have an active subreddit, but they're kind of, to me, a little dormant a lot of the time. And also don't have that player to latch onto. I think that at least this iteration of CLG almost needs to embrace that a little bit. Ruin, Wiggly, Crown, Stixxay, Smoothie. Biofrost is gone. I thought Biofrost was going to be the guy. It's like, yeah, we stole the TSM support. He's ours now. Like, he's going to turn against CLG and give glory. And now they have Smoothie, right? They have 2 Korean soul laners who, while you can respect them as players, it's a hard time for the English language fan base to connect with them. What do you think about CLG being this org with fans in history, but not really the player to latch onto and call your star, like Doublelift was when most CLG fans became CLG fans?
My takeaway is, it's so funny that like whenever an off-season happens, I think all the fans jump to their subreddit or their Discord and they just start having the arguments about like who's the right pickup, who isn't. And to me, when I see CLG fans, I see the CLG fans who are like, can we get Froggen or like someone we know? Like I think there's a big like, man, it would be great to have someone else we can latch onto, because I agree there's a hunger for that. The players that have been around, like Stixxay. And actually, wow, it's just Stixxay now. That's so weird.
Stixxay is entering his 5th year as a COD starter. Longer than Doublelift was on the LCS roster.
Right.
Yeah.
And for Stixxay, I think Stixxay is who he is. He's not quite the showman that I think people would want from.
And he's never going to be.
Yeah. And that's just like flat out the truth. I think there is a level of like, I mentioned like the sports fan moments where I'm just like, oh, Aftermoo interviews and all that. And I am hungry for that. And I get very like, I can't be as emphatic about like, well, one day Ruin and Crown are just going to start shit talking, or even like Wiggly, who is still really young. I think still trying to figure out what kind of player he is in the league scene, like in the LCS pro scene. I'm hopeful for Smoothie because he's always a guy that I've always liked outside of everything. And not to mention, there's something like oddly counter logic gaming about his whole career where he just bounces and bounces and bounces, and it's just like, why does he not have a home? This guy's clearly good. And I'm hoping like the CLG fan in me wants to create this narrative is like, this is the split where he has a home. It feels definitively his. And he's going to show everybody that had been just like passing him around.
Yeah, I can tell you about that actually, because that was one of the first things that CLG management wanted to tell us when we were there, was to tell us about the Smoothie Biofrost trade. They were like, I know a lot of people have been saying that we lost the trade. We won the trade. Like, here's why. And I could actually buy in. I could actually buy into why they won the trade. So talking about Smoothie a little bit more broadly, and also linking it in to the overall like CLG brand and could CLG have a star, Smoothie was on the road to stardom in 2018 spring on Cloud9.
Yeah.
I did the analyst desk every day back then, and Smoothie or Huni were front runners for midseason MVP. Maybe even as late as week 8, we're thinking, hey, Smoothie could maybe win this thing. And then Cloud9 lost a lot of games down the stretch. We had that massive clump of teams at the top of the regular season standings at the end of spring. And then 100 Thieves basically just had this amazing last week. And that kind of catapulted Afremu over Smoothie. And then everyone forgot that Smoothie was an MVP candidate. C9 had a flame out in playoffs because, yeah, they were on a downward trajectory throughout the year. Switched to Zazel, Smoothie went to Echo Fox, had to go to TSM, then that's TSM, so it's Bjergsen's team. You're never going to be the top guy to Bjergsen's team. And people, I'd always kind of hear whispers that, yes, Smoothie is a shot caller, but he just talks so much. He relays all of the information, and when other people are trying to talk, like they just can't, and it clutters our comms, and we can't have him here. But CLG has really quiet comms. So that's what they told us. They said, no, we see this as a positive. How much he communicates will be really good for us, because Wiggly, he just needs information. And Smoothie provides that information. And then when we're getting later on in the game, we need someone to disagree with Wiggly if he's wrong. And they think Smoothie can be that guy. So obviously it's coming from CLG.
Sure, yeah.
So they're going to sell it in a good way. But that makes sense to me. With Smoothie, do you have a better appreciation for the Smoothie trade now that I've told you there?
I do buy into that a bit because I definitely got the sentiment. And this is like from the outside looking in. I do work on the LCS, but for the most part, I don't know anything about the teams, and which is really great because I get to stay a fan.
Right.
From the outside looking in, it looked like they were just like, there was a lot of conversation about like, let's make Biofrost a big shot caller, a leader, and da-da-da-da. And I know that that's a personal, I've heard Biofrost talk about how that's a personal goal for him. But for the thing that CLG needed, I think he was so far away. And like, as much as it hurts to be like, man, that stretch where he was playing Lux supports and it felt like that was his champion and everybody else was just emulating, like that stretch was really, really cool. I agree that it never felt 100% like that was the fix. I am now buying in more into the idea that Smoothie could be the fix, if that's the truth.
Yeah.
If his aspirations are to be the big voice, I see so much of Wiggly in Stixxay, which is, I think these are two players who, if they could, they would just like switch their brain to a different mode, not need to think about anything else, and they just play League. And they just fucking go. There was something really exciting when Ruin first joined, and then I saw Ruin and Wiggly playing together. I thought to myself, it's like, oh, I don't see language barrier in any of that. That worked great. Look at them go and do this together. And maybe this is me, like, again, theorizing maybe too much, but maybe like Crown as a quieter mid lane who's still very, very good. Ruin another a quietish top lane. And then allowing Wiggly to just kind of like calm down a little bit. Maybe if it's just a Smoothie echo chamber, like that's not, I could see a world where that works. And I get really excited by that idea. Especially if, again, I like to imagine that like that Stixxay who was the Ginsu's Tristana was just like quiet and doing his thing.
Yeah, because Afremu was telling what to do,
right.
and then Xmithy was there, and the Shadow was doing the right thing.
Exactly. Yeah, and like I just want to imagine he's just like a machine that goes, and everything that's been happening with the up and downs while he's been with us has been like, hey, how do we get him back to just being a machine? I even remember Hotshot was actually talking about him, like when they just brought him in under Doublelift. And I remember it was like Doublelift like was playing basketball, scratched his hand, Stixxay had to come in or something to that effect. Hotshot was building up this guy's mechanics, like the way he moves is really, really interesting. And it's like I've never seen anybody move quite like this. Again, that's CLG the org building up a player, but I immediately imprinted a persona on him, which is like just let the guy play League, and don't cloud it with this other like LCS competitive pro stuff. Just like have him click minions and move around and not get hit by things. And like, I want to get that 6A back.
Yeah.
And I could see a world where like, hey, the pitch is this combination. This is it. Yes, it involves imports. It's not quite the CLG where it was, five natives.
Guys in a dream or something. Yeah.
It's not quite that, but like, this is how it could work.
Yeah, it could be a teamwork team. You made me think of, this is going to be a bit of a tangent, but you brought me back to the time where Doublelift had the finger injury. So I didn't realize I was doing this at the time because I was on the caster desk when we were talking about the injury. And I think I was with Freak. And he had explained exactly what happened. So he said, like, Doublelift was trying to block a shot of Darshan and his finger got caught in the net. And for some reason I had in my head that Doublelift was like trying to dunk. So even after Freak explained it, I was like, but why was he trying to dunk? And Freak is like, well, he was trying to block a shot. And I just blew right past him. Like I didn't hear it. And then I still remember, like, because it was on his right hand and he had a bandage on it when he was playing. And we had a camera like zoom in on his finger.
I remember that.
Whoa, he's playing through injury. I don't know. It was like a fun esports moment back in the Doublelift days. But to go back to the 2020 roster of CLG, I also really like their training facility. And it is definitely something a lot of other teams are trying to emulate. When TL wins for a number of reasons, right? They have amazing players, they have Doublelift. I don't think the training facility they have should be understated because they had that at the start of 2018. And CLG's done a lot of good stuff. When they do that, it's like they cloned the LCS desk, like they got the specs for it and it's built exactly the same. The wall that they play in front of has basically a painting of the LCS seats. So it's not like one-to-one. The wall's kind of close to the tables, but it's like they're sitting there. They can pump in white noise from their headsets. The desks are at exactly the same height. So they're really trying to recreate the experience. And then after the game, they stand up for VOD review because they're sitting all day. They have all their physical therapy stuff right on the side in a closet. So in between games and during VOD review, everyone does PT. Right outside, they have like a wrap station, a chef. Like it's very similar in structure to what TL has done. And there's other teams that have done that. Like, TSM has announced their huge facility. I think C9 announced one. EG has one now. Like almost everyone's trying to replicate it. But the fact that CLG has that now, I do think helps in the overall thing. So the other thing that they have is the roster changes that I want to talk about is the mid lane, right? Because PoE, he was actually decent last year, right? This is a team that finished third, but they've switched him out for Crown. What was your or the CLG fans' reaction to this Crown acquisition? I
can't react to the CLG fans because all I did was go to talk to my friends who are not CLG fans, and I got very excited. So I remember I wrote this down, but it's not really, I like talking to you more than just going through my list.
Yeah, sure.
One of the parts of like CLG that I really like is like they'll have these moments where I'm just like, oh, no one's doing that. That's awesome that we did that first. Enchanters, they knew lane swaps better. That kind of stuff like I really latch onto. And then something I really liked about last split towards the end of the run was this thing where they were like, we don't care where Ruin or PoE go.
Yeah.
They're going to go to the best matchup. And I was like, that's sick. I love that. They weren't the first to do it, but I'm glad that my team was doing it.
Yeah.
I think PoE doesn't work for that. It's not even I think. He just didn't. Like, he played Victor, and it's like, okay, Victor top's a little different than Victor mid. So, like, I'm not sure you could do this. Your items are different. Are you feeling comfortable? And he seemed really uncomfortable in that kind of a move. But Rune looked good in that move. And then when I think of Crown on Optic, where, and to me, Crown Optic, I believe it might have been summer, but it could have been spring, where Optic had this stretch where they were just winning. And they were winning because Crown was on one side of the map, and then Meteos wrangled the Optic boys, and they were just like, no, we keep them here, and we don't do anything.
It was like the TF split push age, where Crown was
exactly.
Just winning.
And I think of that kind of a player, and then the legacy that Crown has, and how Crown, even on Optic, was considered a top 3 mid laner for a lot of people, and slot him into that scenario. My fantasy is that, like, no, that's how CLG plays. They're going to draft in a way where they can just like, hey, this can go mid or top, no big deal. And if the certain players have locked in, they see what their matchup is like, hey, you want to swap? Yeah, totally. I can do this.
I think that could be good. I had a talk with Weldon where I was like, why are you doing this? And he says, well, we like to hypothesis test a lot, where we take what is known, we do a hypothesis, and then we just test it. And the hypothesis there is, should we really have, with these flex picks, these players learn so many champions, or should we focus more on champions and then just have them learn the lanes? And then really long term, well, if they know both lanes, then they can get more champion mastery. Because it's like everyone assumes that the answer to this question is, well, yeah, lane mastery is way harder than champion mastery, but no one tests it. So they were testing it last year. They wouldn't tell me what their conclusion was. Unfortunately, I'm like, you just got another Korean soul lane, or you're going to do it, right? You're going to swap all the time. They're like, you'll see.
Yeah.
So that's something that I think they will continue.
Cool.
I think, especially after hearing that Ruin was just actually an insane mid laner, like maybe he should be a mid lane, right? Especially if you look at how much he died on his own. Like you can ward mid lane better, you can help him out, and you can maybe play a little smarter. And one other thing I want to talk about here is the connection between Crown and Song.
Okay,
so Song's a new coach for them, and they basically got signed at the same time. So it's weird because they've never directly worked together, but basically when CLG was talking to both of them, they kind of both independently expressed interest of teaming up with the other person. Cool. And they said, like, wait a minute, we should just like tell them about this and then just bring them both in. And that's what they did. So in that sense, they have a decent amount of Korean familiarity, because that has been a problem for certain Korean imports in the past. Ruin did really well last year and has good, basically, translation skills if they want to. I had a conversation with Song. He's been in A for a while. He speaks fine. And then it's just a matter of kind of getting everyone else on the same page. So I kind of see it as overall roster upgrades. I did my power ranking surveys with 16 different people. CLG came out at an average of 4th. I think that's fairly accurate, but if they were 3rd last year and I'm saying they've improved, what does that mean?
It means they're going to go up.
Yeah.
And so I did those power rankings. I put them 3rd.
Okay.
And I only put them 3rd because of everything that you've emphasized earlier in the podcast, which was like, as soon as you believe in them, they crumble. So I could have put CLG first there. And there's a part of me that really thinks that, like,
hey, I did that once. I did it in the spring of 2018.
That's true. You did do that.
Didn't work
well. It did not. But there was a part of me that was like, I can rationalize why TL wouldn't be first. And I can also rationalize why TSM or C9 would not be second. Like, and I think CLG made the most definite upgrade. Like I think there are less question marks around CLG's move. I think that is a very sure, like, this is a direction we're going. And then with the Song swap, I'm totally bought into that. I can't speak to how, like, the Weldon Irene experience worked with Ruin, but my impression was, like, worked fine, clearly. Ruin did seem to get comfortable. If having Song in there alongside Weldon who strikes this balance, then, like, to me, this is all a formula for success. The question is, like, how much higher does it go? That was my argument for a lot of people who put, like, CLG when I was, like, looking at everybody else's list.
Right.
I was like, they literally only did good things. Like, you can maybe argue about Smoothie Biofrost, but I think that that's, like, so minor that it wouldn't be a whole position in the rankings. And for some people it was. It was down to 4th.
I'll give the other side of the coin. CLG finished 3rd and made what we think are roster upgrades. But in spring, they were 7th.
Yeah.
So there is an ebb and flow to this. On the negative end of CLG, Smoothie has bounced around teams because he's too vocal. Crown has fallen into deep slumps in the past in his career. One thing Song did say about Crown is that because Crown is such a hard worker, like, Song believes that even if he's in a slump, he will find his way out of it. I really loved the drive we had between Core JJ and Crown last year. If people haven't seen that, just Google Crown plus Core JJ drive. Watch it. It's amazing. Duos. Don't Google Drive. Google the Crown Core JJ duos, where they reminisce about their world championship with Samsung. It was great. And Wiggly is still relatively unproven. We don't know if this lane swap thing could be a boon or a negative, because if they spend too much time switching lanes, you could actually really mess something up.
They could be bad in all matchups,
right?
Because
there's a lot of ways this can go wrong, which is true for all of the teams. I still have them. I need to double check. I have them 4th because I have TL, C9, TSM. After talking to them, like after leaving the training facility, I said, maybe I should move him up. But that's definitely the recency bias of talking to people who are only telling you good stuff.
But like that, it's so funny because that's the thing that comforts me, because I will always remember you as the person who put them first, and they had a fucking terrible split. So I am happy that you are unsure, and I'm happy that a lot of people are unsure. And I think a lot of CLG fans, as much as they want like to be favorites at some point in time, there's that part of them that are just like, well, when we surprise them, we were the ones that were there all along, and we get to celebrate, and it's authentic. Yeah. There is no bandwagoning here. We've been here through all of this.
Yeah, it's true. And you're still there.
And I'm still there.
Despite Afro and Double Lift and the crew moving on.
My God. Like, it's so funny because that stuff all hurt a lot. I think what hurt the most was the 7-Eleven stretches here, where everybody likes esports. Like, when I'm a CLG fan in my Discord, and I'm like, I'm not coming in tonight. It was bad. I don't need you telling me that TSM won again. I don't need that. When I'm in the studio and we're watching and I'm working and I see them, like, flail, I remember watching the first best of 5. It was against FlyQuest. God, that best of 5 felt so bad because we were 2-0 up.
Yeah.
And then, like, I was nervous, and I remember I was still pretty fresh to the job, and Dave, our producer, was like, do you have to be somewhere? Do you have a date? He didn't know I was a CLG fan, and that's why I was nervous. He thought I had to be somewhere, and I'm sure he was, like, preparing conversations like, Elias, you should be present. But in reality, I was, like, dying because I was like, that's not a third win. And I don't feel good about this game 3, and I don't feel good about this game 4. And then when it all slipped away, I was like, oh, no.
That was the high FlyQuest squad back in 2017.
Yeah.
So I basically wrapped up the 2020, but you made me think of one more question. How much credit versus pain did you feel when the Double Lift, Pobelter, X-Smithy Team Liquid won 2 in a row? Or when the Double Lift, Pobelter, X-Smithy team played against the Aframo team in the finals, and there were interviews saying, it really started all with that amazing 2015 summer team that has really just spread out now, and that's why we're all the best.
I will admit, there's a part of me that will always be like, God damn it. So with X-Smithy, I will always kind of be like, God damn it. He had a really bad stretch, and when he was benched, I was one of the people on the boards being like, bench that guy, get him out of here. The pole buzzer benching was random, as you say. It was one split. Yeah. So like that'll never really sit well. And I think for a lot of fans won't sit well. I will always err towards the double lift dropping was the right thing. I believe that he was like toxic. He has spoken that he was like, hey, I was not a great person then. He's a lot better now. So when it comes to double lift winning on TL, I feel no saltiness. I was like, nah, he had a lot. He went through a lot to get there, and he's better now. I always kind of miss X-Smithy. Always kind of miss Pole Belter. And as far as Aframo is concerned, again, it was like the stretch where things were looking pretty bad. Yeah. But I always kind of miss him too. So when I saw the 100 Thieves versus TL finals, and there was a part of me that was just kind of like, damn, like they're there and we're in 7th figuring shit out.
It reminds me, I like to make basketball analogies. It reminds me of the Oklahoma City Thunder, where for people who don't know basketball, there was this super young team with tons of potential. They had Kevin Durant, Russell Westbrook, and James Harden coming off the bench. And they made it to the finals and lost. Then they trade James Harden. Then a few years later, Kevin Durant leaves the team. But eventually, all 3 of those players win MVPs. I think, just based off that, CLG fans have it better because at least they won. Yeah, that's true. At least they got to win with James Harden, Kevin Durant, and Russell Westbrook, and then they split up and won their MVPs elsewhere. That's true. So even though you can imagine in your head the 4-title run of this team staying together, yeah, Double Lift needed to grow up. Russell Westbrook and James Harden never would have won MVPs if Kevin Durant stayed in Oklahoma City. So don't worry about it. Or at least try not to. No. It'll be easier if they win later.
Oh, no. Yeah, they just need to win spring, and I'll be happy.
Yeah,
and summer.
Just a title.
And go ahead and take a world title.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's all it takes. Yeah. All right, Elias, thanks for talking about CLG.
Thank you, Jatt.
Welcome back, everybody. Jatt here, joined by Mark to talk about Immortals in 2020.
The MarkZ, please.
The MarkZ. What's your Twitter? Like how many E's?
It's 2 E's. It's phonetically correct, grammatically wrong.
What's your Instagram?
Same thing.
What's your TikTok?
I haven't made one yet.
Yeah, me neither.
My YouTube was that, and my Snapchat was that.
Do you still use Snapchat?
No.
There's so many social medias.
No.
I think Twitter's making a resurgence, actually.
Well, did you see they're going to add tipping?
What?
I saw that they might add tipping. I saw a tweet about it.
Yeah. Anyway,
whatever.
I actually use Twitter for like live events now. Like it's interesting.
It's fun to,
It's different than how I used to use it. It used to be like, oh yeah, once or twice a day, like say something. But now it's when something's happening, like I'll tweet. Otherwise,
I'll watch The Bachelor and I'll be like, are you kidding me? That's how I use Twitter.
Okay. Complicated history here for Immortals. Because you and I were just having a conversation before it started, but I want to give a quick history on at least what the Immortals brand was or has been in the LCS. They joined back in 2016 and at the time had the best regular season of any LCS team ever. It was the Huni, Rainover, Pobelter, Wild Turtle, Adrian team. They lost one game in the regular season to CLG, but then got 3-0'd by TSM in the semifinals.
Lucian Top?
The Lucian Top versus Hansers Maokai game. They actually then 3-0'd CLG in the third place game, so like they were still pretty good in spring. Yeah.
Wasn't it TL?
Maybe.
I think it was TL.
They 3-0'd someone in spring.
Yeah.
And then you're right. They beat CLG in the summer split third place match.
Yeah.
Anyway, in summer, they were actually still really good. I think they were 60-2. That's when LCS switched to best of 3. They lost to C9 in semis, won the third place match, and then eventually lost to C9 in the regional qualifiers. So we never got to see that team at Worlds. Huni and Rainover are no more. The 2017 team was Flame, Dardoch, Pobelter, Cody Sun, Ole. That team kind of sucked. They brought in Xsmithy
between spring and
Song
summer.
Between spring and summer because of a trade with CLG. They make it all the way to the finals before losing to TSM. If you think back, like maybe that should have been an Xsmithy MVP campaign. Really.
Pretty nuts turnaround.
Yeah.
Because they were like a 7th place team with Dardoch, if I remember correctly.
They were not a playoff team.
Yeah.
So that was a huge turnaround. A lot of it ended up being accredited to Song, the coach.
A lot to Song. Ole had a really good... He was in MVP discussions a little bit, if I remember.
He was.
In that summer split.
Ole was super hyped. And then like Cody Sun...
It was the beginning of Cody Sun's hypeness because he did it on 3 teams.
He's now gone to Worlds 3 consecutive years with
that was the start
teams.
of 2017 with Immortals, and then he did it in 2018 with... This is a Cody Sun topic.
Yeah.
Never mind. That was the beginning.
It was old Immortals, yeah.
Yeah, but that was the beginning of Cody Sun's, like, I'm a dominant North American AD carry.
And so many players that kind of touched this org back in 2016 and 2017, and even the coaches are still around in the LCS. Like Song is now the coach of CLG with their 2 Korean soul laners. We'll talk about them in a different episode. But really a strange ending to Immortals in 2017. They were 2-1 in the first half of their group stage. This was the group with Longju, who ended up going 6-0. A lot of people thought they were like a world's favorite.
Yeah.
Fnatic and Gigabyte Marines. First round robin, they beat Fnatic, they beat Gigabyte Marines. Really all they had to do was just win a game.
Yeah, because...
Like a single game.
There was... I think Gigabyte Marines was 1-2, and Fnatic was 0-3.
Yes.
And then, start of week 2, Fnatic loses again.
Yes.
They're 0-4.
Yes. And then Immortals loses to Fnatic, to Marines, and then they lose a tiebreaker. It was also the moment of Cody Sun trying to make the big play on Reckless down in bottom lane, and that was like, we didn't know it at the time because permanent partnership hadn't been announced, but that ended up being the last Immortals game.
The death of Immortals.
Yeah, was that moment of actually being a Worlds caliber team. But it's a little strange now because Optic joined the LCS team. That's what Immortals has taken over. So they still have Zabutin as the coach of the team. But compared to what Optic was in 2019, which was Dokla, Meteos, Crown, Arrow, Big.
All gone, basically.
Yeah, all the starters are gone. Arrow's still under contract, but because their current roster for 2020 is Soaz, Xsmithy, Eika, Altec, and Hakuho, they can't start Arrow if they start Soaz and Eika because they already have 2 imports. So it feels really weird. And I want to start all of these with the kind of wisdom of the crowd power rankings that I did, where I asked like 16 people that follow the LCS, and the average placement was 8th. How do you feel about that for expectation setting?
We'll probably get into it a little bit more when we start talking about all these players
Yeah.
and how they gel together. I think that sounds about right.
Yeah.
But I don't want to.
Yeah, so it's a team that has a lot of unknowns, and I think that's what we kind of wanted to focus on.
Yeah, and I think the thing that jumps out for why it is low in a lot of people's minds is there's not much star power or firepower, as you sometimes hear it. In the TL episode, we're talking about, like, Jensen is good enough to be a number 1 on most teams, but he's a number 2 on TL. This is one where I'm like, I don't even know who would be a number 2 on some other teams, and you don't even have that. You know, like, who's the carry of this team? And when you start asking those questions, it's very scary, but I think that's why the 8th ranking makes sense, for the most part.
Yeah, and Soaz is not coming off his best year.
No, that was my number 1 for like topics about this team.
Yeah.
After you get through the history and stuff, is Soaz.
Yeah, we're basically done the history. As far as, I just kind of personally find it cool that I still see this team as Immortals, even if behind the scenes it's like a lot different. Noah, the original CEO of Immortals, was like a big face of their brand. Like, technically this is the Optic team, like reskinned, but I still see the brand holding some type of equity.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I would be interesting to see what people's responses in the comments or whatever to this, because for me it does not feel like, it's like Face Off or something, where like they just took the face and slapped it on someone else's body, and it's like...
That was John Travolta and Nicolas Cage.
Yeah.
If anyone hasn't seen Face Off, you probably don't need to, but Nicolas Cage and John Travolta.
It got hyped up to me, and then I watched it, and I was like,
faces.
oh, it's kind of interesting, but it's just really weird. The point is, I don't feel like it's the same team because, like you said, Noah was such a big part of like the Immortals identity. That's not there anymore. Plus, like, it's not really Optic either, so you can't pretend like, like Dignitas and Clutch from summer to now. Yeah, it doesn't feel like that big of a turnover, and I have buy-in in that, like, that's the same people.
The Digniclutch team.
Yeah.
Even though, like, it's Hooney.
Right. Well, yeah, I don't think this is Dignitas with Skara and Odie and, like, I know that, but at least it's Clutch or something. This has almost nothing, because like you said, the whole roster's different. Zab is, like, literally the only thing tying this to Optic. I think all the other staff is gone, too.
Which is why I think it's tied more to Immortals, if it's going to tie to anything.
Yeah, but even then, because what was the identity, I don't know.
Yeah, it's a new team.
Yeah, I think
that's
it's
a history for those that see it.
And we'll see, if the people who were Immortals fans come back this year.
Yeah, well, they do have Smithy. He's the one tie.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's true.
Yeah, he's the tie-in to the last version of Immortals, and it's also, I know I recorded the TL podcast with you as well. This was the team that propped up the original Team Liquid after permanent partnership happened and all their players got bought by TL to come back here.
Yeah. And, I mean, somewhat similar to some of those Immortals teams. Maybe not the first one, the 2016 one, which was really dominant, but the 2017 one felt a little bit like, at the time, people were kind of saying it was like an Island of Misfit Toys type team, where Smithy was on CLG, and he, like, led the league in deaths. He had a horrible spring split that year. And then bounced back. And Flame was like unwanted. He left China and left Korea before coming to North America. And Ole had bounced around everywhere too, in Brazil and things like that before. And Cody, I think there's something about him that like he hadn't really gotten a shot yet.
Yeah, no one thought he was good, right? Because he was young. He was actually his first big year.
Yeah, so like the 2016 team had that feeling, or 2017 team, excuse me, had a feeling of like, ooh, a lot of unknowns.
Yeah.
A lot of people who we've seen a little bit before, but then they all worked out really well.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, where I'm hoping this team can land a little bit more.
If we do like a best case scenario, worst case scenario, there are some things that could definitely go well for the team. And Smithy, I think Smithy is at the core of it all, where when you look at his history, basically everywhere he's been, he's won.
Yeah.
And that goes back for the real, like,
Vulcan,
hardcore
baby.
LCS fans. Exactly. Vulcan, where they went to Worlds, where Smithy and Mandatory Cloud.
Best mid-jungle deal there, baby.
Mandatory Cloud still holds the record for most kills per game in an LCS split.
Wow. I didn't know that.
It was like 6.5 or something in
Holy.
2013 summer.
Wow.
They were popping off. Thanks to Smithy in the jungle. Anyway, so it's like Smithy was good on TL. We considered him a glue jungler. When I look at this roster, And I think about how Soaz played last year, how Eika has actually been playing pro for quite a while. We'll talk about him later, just not at the, I guess, LCS or LEC level. Altec, who was an LCS player for many years.
Goes all the way back to like 2013, basically.
Yeah, it goes all the way back to Evil Geniuses NA, back when they were in 2014. And then Hakuho, who's been laning with Apollo for 4 years, is the team. So if these players are to succeed or become a playoff team, I think a lot of it would be like how important can XMithy be?
And we've seen teams historically who didn't jump off the page, so to speak, in terms of firepower, do well, especially in spring, where other teams are finding their footing more.
Yeah.
Teams that have good leadership and can gel sometimes do really well. Like FlyQuest is an example of teams like that. They've had a couple rosters where you're not like, wow, what a great team, and then they get like 4th or 5th or something. And so
FlyQuest made semifinals in spring.
Yeah. And that was, the Santorum one, and they had a much worse summer. But in spring, even then, people were like, ooh, it's kind of like a bunch of okay players. And teams like that can do well. And I think that's like what the high end for this team is like a 4th or 5th type showing off of really good teamwork.
How do you think XMithy will deal like with this split? Because everyone is very respectful, and I think him being replaced by Broxa, I think was very tactfully done by TL. I've seen a few let's just compare. Let's compare when TSM replaced a player in 2017. Like
they found out on Reddit.
Well, no, like even when I'm trying to get my details right because there's a lot of TSM fans. But when Doublelift got kicked and they brought in Sven and Mithy, there was, like, in a TSM Legends episode, we had coaches talking about how Doublelift read the meta wrong and how they kind of felt like they kind of tried to justify their move on the way out of, this guy really wasn't working, so we had to do this.
Right.
Whereas TL was a little bit more like, look at all the great things XMithy has done, and we're bringing in Broxa.
Right.
Right? I think I like that more.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
But I wonder how that affects him, because at the end of the day, he did he's no longer on the 4-time champion that he helped accomplish, and he's now on this new team.
Well, that's why I think the whole island of misfit toys, everyone has something to prove kind of team works here. Soaz, which I'm sure we'll get into in a minute here, horrible 2019.
Oh, yeah.
He has a lot to prove coming over. He's also, for the most part, in joking manner, made a lot of comments about people moving over from NA in general. He's always liked making fun of North America, and now he's here. And so, like, that's not a shot. I'm from North America. I'm not saying, anything. I'm just saying that, like, he's always kind of he's a funny guy. He likes making jokes. So he liked making fun of North America when we failed. But now, after coming off a bad split in Europe, he has a lot to prove. Altec coming back after basically a year off. Didn't play at all in 2019.
Yeah.
Hakuho finally getting split up from Apollo, as well as, like, being around for, at this point, a pretty long time. There's some players who are like, wow, he's so underrated. And people say that for 4 or 5 years on end. That's kind of Hakuho at this point, where it's like he's appropriately rated, I think, as one of the better supports in the league, but not. I
turned on Hakuho and Apollo about a year and a half ago.
Oh, that long ago.
Yeah, I think so. Actually, you and I did the analyst desk full time in 2018.
Yeah.
And
were we really different on them?
Well, one of us hated, like, everyone thought we hated Clutch. That was
they thought I hated Clutch because I just predicted them to lose all the time.
Well, I did too. I felt like that team was just consistently overperforming their expectations rather than, like, actually they're great. And then they kind of fell apart in summer. But the Apollo Hawk were like, yeah, these are the guys. I'm like, yeah, they'll be middle of the pack for you forever. And that's what it did feel like me there. But I think it's good for Hakuho to actually find a new AD carry partner, because he did have that peak performance in the TSM series in 2018.
Yep.
Spring split. So if he can do something big, it would be good for this team. But going back, let's just kind of go a little bit down the line with Soaz. 8-10 in spring split with Misfits. That was a team that for many preseason power rankings, people saw right at the top.
Yeah.
It was like, oh yeah, G2, Fnatic, and Misfits, they're going to be the heavyweights. Let's see what happens. they're 8-10. Soaz plays 8 games in summer. They implode. They put in their academy team. Everyone leaves. And as you mentioned, kind of has the French connection with Zaboutine as coach, but is a player who was in the World Final 2 years ago.
I mean, in terms of Western players, probably the most storied.
If you talk about legacy, it's way up there.
Yeah, I mean, people have had somewhat higher peaks, you could argue, with some of the, especially recently, the European guys in G2 winning MSI. Some of the older European players, but that Soaz was still around then, you know, like season 2, season 1, like he's been around forever. He's probably the most storied player in the West.
Yeah, he was at the season 1 World Championship in the finals against Fnatic. He was on Against All Authority for the second.
Rip. But like probably, quite literally the most storied player in Western history.
Yeah.
So he, I think, is pretty resilient. So I don't think that what happened with Misfits is necessarily entirely indicative of his skill level. I tried to dig around. I asked some people in the European scene like if they knew anything more to the story, because what happened also between spring and summer was they made an announcement about using their 10-man roster kind of thing. And I don't know. I know for some people that some people enjoy the 10-man roster for players and some don't, and I don't know how that worked, but they ended up coming out 2-6, I think, in the first 4 weeks, and that's when they were like, all right, we can't be any worse, so let's put in all 5 academy players from the other 5 players on the 10-man roster, you know. And then Soaz had a string of tweets about how like the year was basically boomed, and explaining like he and Hans Sama had paid for their own trip to Korea to try and like level up, so he was still try-harding the whole time. But something obviously super boomed, and so you know you don't want to read too far into it because it's going to be a new environment. And I think he is very meta resilient. He's been, you know, playing forever. So I think he'll at least be good.
Yeah.
The problem...
How good?
Yeah,
right?
So that's when we start getting into
Top 5?
He hasn't really been a main carry player
for a while.
Yeah, he's his most played Shen. He's mostly known for playing more team-oriented stuff and being like really good. Like when I think of Soaz, I think like what a great 1v2 player back when we had lane swaps and stuff. He was always so smart about it.
Yeah, the one Soaz game that hangs in my memory the most was actually the quarterfinals of the 2017 World Championships against RNG when he played Gnar. It felt like he solo won that game against RNG. That was, obviously he's had like this incredibly storied history, but that was a moment like, damn, Soaz he's still got it.
Yeah,
but that was also 2.5 years ago.
Yeah, and I mean, I think if I remember from spring, it was either on Urgot or Aatrox. Remember when there was like kind of that Black Cleaver power trio of like Urgot, Aatrox, and there's one other I'm forgetting.
Well, it was, I mean, in 2018 Worlds, the power duo was Aatrox, Urgot.
Yeah, whatever. So he's played those. He can play Black Cleaver like bruisers. Gnar's, I would say, more bruisery. He doesn't play like super hard carries like a Fiora split or something like that. Or like range dominant stuff. I guess he can play Kennen, but not, you know, he's not much of a Jace player, I would say. I don't think of him as that. And I feel like that's what this team needs, unfortunately.
I mean, at the start when you said, oh, who's even the number 2, it is Soaz.
Yeah, it would be. Yeah,
he has an opportunity here where he shouldn't have to defer to someone else.
To dog champs. Yeah, that's the big meme with him.
He doesn't have to play dog champs, right? He doesn't have a Reckless on his team or a Caps on his team that requires the resources. It could be. We don't know what this team is going to look like, right?
Yeah.
We don't know who they're going to play through, but I think Soaz would be someone who'd be capable of that. Eika is someone who, if Eika does well, there's going to be a lot of people that are proven wrong, I think.
What? There's at least one in this recording booth right now.
Mark is holding up his hand. I know Kobe has been fairly outspoken about, like, kind of like what is going on here. You know, if we talk about young talent, actually, like, there's been years for people to scout this guy, and now is his opportunity.
He's been in the LDLC team for
Team
2
LDLC.
years, and the LFL, which is the French National League, has only been around for 1 year, and they won both splits, if I remember.
Yeah,
so
successful in that arena.
Right, but I think if you look at him and you kind of dig into the stats, it's not like he jumps off the page like, oh, this guy's dominating this league. He's a good player. He's one of the best mid laners there, obviously. Probably the best, but not to the point that someone else seems to have swooped in and grabbed him because he's been around since, if you go to his Leaguepedia page, there's details since 2014, and at least 2 years on this team, having a good amount of success performing in other events. So, there is that kind of feeling like, well, he's not exactly like young European talent, and he also never broke in over there. So what is really his ceiling here, which I can understand where people like Kobe are coming from. I might find myself in that camp.
Yeah, I do this thing where I'm evaluating teams, which I think would kind of be like a disaster to publish because everyone will take it at its face value and then hold it against you forever. Yeah, but what I try and do is I just say, okay, at first glance, I look at a position and then I say, this is the best player in the position, this is the worst player in the position, and then I rank everyone in between.
Yeah.
And for Immortals, I have Eika just off of face value. I look at the other mid laners, Jensen, Niski, Crown, Bjergsen, Froggen, PoE, Jizuke, and then we have Golden Glue, Ryoma, and Eika. And he kind of falls into that crew for me when I'm thinking about it, just because, as you mentioned, the LEC has been so good
at finding mid lane
talent and giving them a pro opportunity right away. This is an opportunity. It is a pro opportunity. It didn't come right away. So there's always the chance that in a more elevated league, a player can shine more, but he's got a stacked deck against him right at the start.
Yeah, it's not like he's getting a ton of help either.
He has Xmithy. That's the really interesting thing.
I guess that's true.
Mandatory Cloud with Xmithy.
Oh, that's so long ago.
Pobelter with Xmithy. Jensen with Xmithy.
He was the Lee Sin player in 2013, Smithy. He's not a Lee Sin player anymore. He can play it. He's fine. I'm not saying he's bad, but it's not like he's the I'm in your face destroying you at your wolf camp.
Yeah, I mean,
Lee Sin anymore.
Xmithy has been a top 2 LCS jungler for 3 years.
Yeah.
So that is a great situation for a mid laner to come into in terms of individual success.
That's definitely true. Yeah. I think the thing that interests me is I try and stats in League are hard. And you'll always hear people talk about how much context is needed for any given stat.
Yeah.
One that doesn't need that much extra context is CS per minute.
Okay.
For mid laners and AD carries. It matters a lot more for the other roles. Like jungler and support don't care. Top laners really depends on what you're playing for how much CS you're getting. But mids and bots should basically be above 9. That's a good metric.
Yep.
You should generally be.
And when it gets above 11 or something, something's off.
Yeah,
it's like
Uzi,
well, that's kind of a funnely type thing.
Yeah, like Uzi is always at like 10.5. And you're like, okay, well, I know what's happening there when I dig into it.
Yeah.
I did some research a long time ago about how many players in North America were at 9. It was actually lower than a lot of other leagues, which is one of the things where I was like, maybe we have something we should be working on.
Right.
In the French league, no player was above 9, and Eika was like second highest at 8.6, I believe. And then I looked just quickly at the LEC, and there was like 6 people above 9 or something like that. And it's not like some blanket statement, end all be all thing, but it's just like a quick heuristic that I try and use to be like, this is a competitive player, or not competitive, but like this is like a bench. It's like shooting,
a benchmark.
It's like shooting, 40%. Or like from 3, like that's a good 3-point shooter because they're shooting when they're open for the most part. Between 35 and 40% is like that's a great 3-point shooter or something like that. Running back gets 4 yards per carry. That's a benchmark of a pretty standard
successful run game.
Yeah, and so that's what I look at. If you're at 9, you're doing a good job in the mid lane laning phase, probably last hitting and picking it up in the mid to late game as well. And the fact that he's not there in a lower league, maybe they're roaming around and playing wacky, which is always possible.
Yeah, I think Zabutin and Immortals is taking a pretty big gamble to bring Eika in.
Yeah.
Because Pobelter's not starting in the league. DeMonte's not starting in the league. They weren't the best, but they were middle of the pack mid laners.
Yeah, I mean,
and if Eika's not middle of the pack or better, then why?
Yeah, unless you're like, we're gonna develop him, but but
Pobelter and Eika are the same age.
Yeah, that's true. Both 23.
Right.
Yeah.
So like Pobelter's been around forever because he started playing pro when he was 15. So yeah, this is a player that's immediately going to come under scrutiny in this league.
Yeah, and I think to Zab's point, I had seen him in the offseason last year, and we were talking about rosters and stuff like that. And you said one thing that's unfortunate is that you don't know people's budget. And so you can look at someone's roster and be like, what are these signings? They're random and bad. Look at all these other players. that other people are getting and stuff. And he's
Yeah.
like, well, like he couldn't even go after them last year.
I mean, we did a countdown segment like a year and a half ago before the trade deadline.
Oh yeah,
Trade deadline mega thing. Like, why don't they just trade this player for that player? Because we don't know any of the salaries, and the GMs were just like probably just behind the scenes fuming.
Yeah. And that's it's a fun
makes
segment.
3 times as much money as this person or something.
Yeah. So to Zab's point, knowing that he has been in that position previously with what was Optic's ownership group.
Yeah.
This is a roster that when you look at it is probably relatively inexpensive because Altec, who we'll get into in a minute, I'm sure, is coming back.
Yeah.
Soaz is coming off a down year.
Yeah.
Smithy is probably one of the big spends. Eika is not going to be very expensive, and Hakuho seems like wasn't receiving too much attention in the offseason. So
yeah,
I think that it's something to keep in mind that like not the playing field is not as equal as it might appear on first glance at the league.
I completely agree. I mean, look at it's a young league. It doesn't have salary caps yet. It doesn't have max salaries for players.
Doesn't even have public salary information yet.
Yeah. So who knows?
Yeah.
What they
this
ended
could be
up
like
having.
a $1.2 million roster, per year, and then you have a team like which just guessing 5,
Right.
like 5 times the budget.
Let's talk about Altec.
Okay.
Because he has been around the LCS for a super long time. He's like 80 carry pole belter, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I was gonna say, give me your gut check on him before we get.
Yeah, the really young 80 carry that everyone said, give him a couple years, imagine how good he'll be.
I feel like this is like a weird thing. I feel like that's an insult to pole belter. He's won titles.
Well, yeah, he did it. Original pole belter was on.
Well, they played together. He had a different name.
Winter Fox.
Yeah, but they were even before that. Even before the LCS started, they played on teams together because they were both like 2 super young kids.
Oh,
it was like
that team.
Yeah, I can't remember their name. It's like 2012, 2011.
It was like a qualifier team.
Yeah,
it was the memeiest name.
Yeah,
Do
whatever.
you have anything? I'll get the name.
My point is, while you look that up, is that pole belter like punched through whatever that ceiling is and became.
Was it Meat Playground?
Maybe it was Meat Playground with
X
Hazard and something.
And they had like the stupidest logo.
It looked like Super Meat Boy or something.
you can Leaguepedia this.
Is it that?
Pole belter was on Meat Playground. Altec wasn't.
I feel like
we just ruined it.
There's something. I know they played together at some point. Maybe it wasn't Meat Playground.
Okay.
My point is, pole belter punched through and won titles and went to international events and has the best best domestic native North American career. Yeah, that's not true for Altec, and he never even punched into top 3 or 4 really.
Yeah, I mean, in 2014. They would have been seen similarly. And they were both on Evil Geniuses at the same time.
Yeah.
Back when it was back when Snoopé moved over with Yellow Pete and Crepo from EGEU, there was like that whole thing that happened.
Weird.
That was a weird time.
There's a lot of weird
in
stuff
LCS.
Going on there.
And then we had the all-Chinese LMQ make Worlds as any representative.
Rip.
Those were the days.
Rip curse.
Really.
But Altec, he's had some really good performances, like his time on Gravity when they were the first place team in the regular season. He was a big part of that. Anytime Sivir feels strong in the meta, he's like, oh wait, this kid's really good. And he had another time like that with Dignitas when they made a run into 4th or 3rd, I think, with Someday as well. Him and Adrian combined together to be really well, do really well in the bot lane. And so he has these periods where you start to think, ooh, maybe he could be breaking in, but then it never lasts, it feels like. And then whatever happened in Echo Fox 2018 summer.
Yeah. He, I took a look at his Twitter. It's not very active.
I would think so.
But he did retweet the League Ops rule changes for how much notice a team needs to give, because I think that's worth bringing up. Altec was on Echo Fox in, was it 2018
It was
summer
2018, yeah.
It was summer 2018, and right before the trade deadline, Echo Fox cut salary with Altec and Phoenix, but it was like the day of roster lock.
Yeah.
So Altec and Phoenix didn't find teams, and then like it kind of continued for Altec. He didn't find a team for 2019 spring either, but recently he did a solo boot camp in Korea, basically. Like he went to Korea to grind solo queue. He made a tweet about being 795 LP challenger. That's where he ended after his month in Korea. And that was enough for him to get another opportunity. So in that way, I got to commend the resiliency of Altec
Yeah.
to be out of the league for a year. But then you also have to be wondering, why wasn't he on Academy? Like, what's happened with this guy? Because he's kind of been dark, aside from the retweet of the rule change and tweeting. He retweets other players' free agency announcements, and then he tweets his challenger stuff, and that's it.
Yeah, I mean, and to be fair, too, it is nice to see that kind of, I don't want to call it a safety blanket because being unemployed for a year is not really, but there's like, a way back. Whereas I feel like in a lot of sports, if you drop out for a year, you're probably just done because you can't go play somewhere in the meantime and keep your level relatively high. You're not playing like rec league basketball if you're, you miss a year. Yeah. But he can go to Korea and grind, and someone will take notice. And I mean, he didn't even have to go back to an academy team like you're saying. Well, I don't know what happened in 2019, but in 2020, he gets to skip the academy step and go right back into starting for Immortals. Yeah, which is cool, and I like to see that progression. I think it just comes back to like, will he be better than he was when we last saw him? Right. Which is
where he was okay.
Where he was like a middle of the packy, usually kind of more as a cleanup AD carry is how he felt on things like Sivers and Kog'Maws and more long range, less playmaking.
And what does this team need?
That too is the big question.
There's a blueprint of playing around a godlike ADC, and that's the Liquid blueprint, right? There's a blueprint for trying to play around mid lane, and that's generally, at least in NA, that's either the C9 or the TSM blueprint, right? And then there's the top lane one, which hasn't actually found that much success, but for a little bit, it's the Huni one. They try it. So I think with this team, the next question I have for you is, what are your expectations for them? But also, like, what's the peak of this team? Because obviously, people don't expect them to make the playoffs, but they could. So what kind of percentage chance do you have of them making the playoffs? And what's best case, Immortals?
I think best case for me is that this is a team that has a lot of hungry people who are going to get together and work well in a team setting. And the other people, which sometimes happens in spring, struggle to hit the ground running quite the same way. The people who might have a little bit more talent, people like a 100 Thieves maybe, depending on how much you want to put stock on Ryoma, or Evil Geniuses, some of these people who made splashier moves, but they actually don't work out in any capacity, right? Even TSM falling into that category.
Sure.
I think in spring, especially when those teams flounder in the first couple weeks maybe, if a team that's hungry with a lot of people who are good about being team players and you don't have a bunch of superstar mentality, that they can find a play style pretty quickly. Like, this could be a team that just works well together generally. So as is ready with his TPs, the mid laner is fine roaming and leaving waves. Yeah. Smithy knows where he needs to be to make plays happen. Hakuho can be a playmaker for this team. Like, maybe they can find a play style that works well for them and abuse teams who are a step slow, especially in spring. Yeah. And I think they have a higher ceiling, I think, for me in spring than summer. And I can see that's my high end, where they never have the superstar pop-off players, but they work really well.
I think I agree. And I would just put a bit more focus on Xmithy of this team succeeding. Yeah. And then if I get towards my actual opinion, I am highly skeptical. Because this will be the case for both Svenskeren and Xmithy this year, that jungling without lanes that create their own advantages is borderline impossible in pro. And if
Depends what you're trying to do.
Sure, but if Soaz, Eika, and Altec aren't creating their own edges that you can play around, it could be doomed. Because junglers, like, one of the first rules of jungling in solo queue that helped me climb was I should be very, very careful about ganking losing lanes.
Yep.
And it's probably simpler to actually just say, don't.
Yeah.
Only play around your strong dude. And if none of these guys are able to get strong on their own, where does that leave Xmithy and Svenskeren?
I think, take a look at Jankos, right?
Yeah.
As an example. He was a top 3, top 4 jungler in Europe his whole career, made Worlds a number of times, had some good runs on H2K, very well respected, good player, and sometimes pushed for the best in Europe, maybe during certain time frames. G2 levels up their soul lane super hard. They add caps. Perks goes into the bot lane. Wonder's there now too, after being there the year before. They're getting advantages in all 3 lanes, and it's like, dude, just pick where you want to go. It's like every lane is serving for
Yeah.
you. Dive wherever you want. Do whatever you want. The other jungler's under pressure trying to cover his losing lanes that are happening. Go take his stuff. He's busy. You know, like it's just like if you've never played with like a dominant group of laners as a jungler, like it's mind-boggling how much easier the game becomes.
Oh, it was great.
And like Jankos in that environment skyrockets to like hands down best jungler in Europe, in top, you know, in the conversation for best in the world with Tian and going into the Worlds with Tian and Clid. You know, like he went from probably one of the best in Europe to one of the best in the world in people's mind. And that's not to say that he isn't that good, but just like you get to show that off when you have those opportunities. And if Smithy is busy running around, cleaning up, losing lanes, protecting dives, and this kind of stuff, you just, what can you do?
Yeah. So I'll just give my concrete predictions for Immortals then. We've done the peaks, we've done the valleys. I think 9th. I think that's where I put them right now. With the fact that, yes, they could hit the ground running, but I know a lot of teams are having visa issues. I'm not completely up to date. Teams don't generally like to talk about this, but like if they don't get much practice time before spring, like there goes their small, hey, Smithy's, you know, has great instincts advantage, and Soaz is very experienced advantage. So we'll see. They can obviously overperform.
Yeah, I think 9th is about where I'm at, 8th or 9th. It depends. It really depends more on other people, I think. Like, how many boom teams are there? Because there's always some, there's always some team was just like, that never worked out. You know, like 100 Thieves last year where Bang comes over and they've got Someday and you know, and it's like everyone was really hyped for 100 Thieves in spring. And then it's just like, no. One of the worst teams in the league. So, you know, that's where I think they can climb a little bit more. But I think that's, you know, speaking more about the other teams than Immortals at that point.
Sure.
I don't think they'll be a completely mental boom team.
Got any final thoughts on Immortals?
Nope.
Sweet. Thanks for joining me on the Immortals episode.
Yeah, it's fun.
A lot of unknowns on these guys. Let's see what happens in 2020.